Hello and welcome to People and Profit. I'm Charles Pellegrin. This week we head to Belem in Brazil, where COP30, the UN's annual climate summit, takes place. The event is being billed as a make or break moment in the fight to limit climate change at a time when the US is turning back on its commitments and where barely a third of the Paris Accord signatories have presented updated emissions targets. While experts now agree it is almost inevitable that temperatures will rise over 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. Well, one of the major stumbling blocks in climate talks have been differences between industrialized nations in the global north, historically responsible for carbon emissions, and developing nations of the global south. And to help us make sense of these discussions, let's welcome Charra Tesfaye Terfassa, Program Manager at the Open Society's Economic and Climate Prosperity Program. Thank you very much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
So, Brazil's COP30 chief opened this COP30 conference by saying that rich countries had lost their enthusiasm for tackling the climate crisis. The obvious example that comes to mind here is the US under Donald Trump backing out of its commitments. But is this an assessment you share considering other rich nations as a whole?
Well, I think the starting place for this conversation is not just the US, but we have a lot of commitments that have been made, and we see countries struggling to meet those targets and to even make new targets. We've seen the submission of the nationally determined contributions, which are the contributions that countries make in accordance with the Paris Agreement. We are seeing some major countries also not submitting their targets. So all these things considered together, the failure in terms of finance, the problems that we have with regards to measures that are being taken by developed countries that are impacting different countries negatively as well. One can make the case that there is some waning interest from the side of developed countries. I would agree.
Mm-hmm. You touched on it already now, the financing needs for developing nations to cope with climate change, whether it's to transition to a green economy or to finance climate resilience. Those needs are huge, over $1 trillion a year within the next decade, I believe. And back in Baku at the last COP in Azerbaijan a year ago, rich nations actually agreed to up their contributions to that climate finance to the tune of 300 billion euros per year. So where can the rest of that financing come from? Should wealthier nations step up their games even more?
The agreed amount that is needed per year is 1.3 trillion, but we have no means of getting there. So we have a mobilization target that is associated with the Baku to Belem roadmap, which we still have not seen full details of. Those things come from different pieces. They can come from help with domestic resource mobilization. They can come from improving the financial system so that they can deliver more money from the private sector, from other sources of finance. They can come from levies and other new innovative sources of finance from different places. But I think the most important conversation with this is where the money that catalyzes all this comes from. This is the main debate that the developing countries are pushing forward. It's to say we need the provision target, which is to say the free money that developed countries need to provide for developing countries has to take the lead. And that's part of the negotiations at this COP as well. We have an agenda request on Article 9.1, which deals exactly with this issue, that it states that developed countries need to take lead on providing finance for developing countries for climate action. And we don't have a lot of progress on that topic.
On the topic of the cost of this transition to a greener economy, there's been a lot of talk about China's huge leaps and bounds they've made in producing renewable energy, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, and making that technology cheaper, more accessible. How is that playing a part currently?
It's a very important piece. In terms of energy transition, however, there are pieces of the puzzle that we tend to not think about. For example, in terms of access, we have a lot of a big size of the population in the developing world, particularly in Africa, that is not connected to a grid or does not have access to electricity, and those people would need to be connected. And the price going down on technologies that could make that happen through decentralized grids, for example, is a good thing, but the expenses are still very high. And also, we're going to miss the opportunity to be able to benefit from the actual value chains that are associated with making the solar panels or the other technologies that we use for producing electricity. And that is the opportunity that we have to think about. And the role of China in this is going to be very important. We have to think about how we transfer technology and how we make sure that that is financed, that is also supported by the infrastructure around, for example, IP rights and the business environment that needs to happen to make all those transitions happen.
You mentioned intellectual property rights, and that's a clear barrier for some global south countries in fully adopting some of this green technology. Can you tell us more about those patents and how that's a barrier?
The issue with intellectual property rights, the way they're done now, is that they have created barriers for technology transfer, but also to access questions. So if a company, let's say in a developing country, wants to start producing these things in country, the technology that is needed has to come through licensing or some other way of arrangement with the companies that control these things, which are usually placed in a developed country, or in the case of solar panels and solar technology, for example, mostly in China. And also the main point with this is not just a matter of decarbonization or a matter of making the energy systems clean. It's also about the economic opportunity associated with this. And if we can make sure that countries in the global south, countries in Africa, for example, benefit from the opportunity of producing these things and also create new technology by using what we have in place now.
It's a very interesting part of the conversation that's perhaps overlooked quite often in these discussions. But let's take a break from our conversation now to get an illustration of the impact that climate change and the policies put in place to fight against it can affect people in global south countries. Fishing communities in South Africa, for instance, they're suffering from both the dwindling number of fish they haul in every day, as well as from the environmental regulations put in place to protect those fish. Well, Brian Quinn has a story.
On South Africa's False Bay, local fishermen return to shore in their small wooden boats. As recently as 2 years ago, their nets would be full. Now their catch has fallen by 80%.
Climate change is affecting our fish here. But in the years big, you can come and you can throw the net full of fish. Now it's bad.
Marine surface temperatures along the South African coastline have risen by up to 2 degrees Celsius, disrupting migration and spawning cycles of local fish species and sending them into deeper waters further from shore. To help depleted populations recover, the government has put restrictions on fishing activity, requiring permits, instituting quotas, and designating marine protected areas. Fishermen in nearby Kalk Bay say those rules are killing their livelihoods.
When the month is good for the crayfish, the quality is good where you can make some money, they don't allow you to catch crayfish in that month.
Scientists, though, insist the measures are necessary and will ultimately benefit small-scale fishing.
We're living in changing times, and we all must adapt and we all must change to allow recovery and recuperation of our oceans. And if fishermen understand the science and the reason why the science is there for the marine protected areas, and we just move around these MPAs to allow recovery, I think everyone can win.
At the UN COP30 climate conference underway in Brazil, South Africa is among the nations calling for more climate finance, including a global support framework for vulnerable communities like nearshore fishermen.
So, Charra, what's your reaction to this story? Is it representative of any sort of wider narrative around global change?
Well, this is a very interesting story, and this is not the only story about how the impacts of responses to climate change is impacting communities. And we have similar stories in Sri Lanka, in different communities where fishing is an important part of their livelihoods. And also, I think that the important question that we need to raise is, it's not just climate that is the way we react to climate change and the policies that we put in place. And this is exemplified by bigger policy issues like the carbon border adjustment measure, which is introduced by the European Union as part of their climate action, and to say we're going to adjust measures that countries have imposed on specific goods, of course, but still adjusting them to the standard that the European Union expects. Those kinds of measures have impacts on the livelihoods and the lives of people. And this is something that we see not just at the national level, but also at the international level with measures like this.
You touched on it just before in our conversation, the opportunity that the climate change battle can present for developing nations to have a fairer, more open international economic system. How is that going? What are we seeing at that now with this new economy? Is this actually happening, or are we seeing old patterns repeat themselves?
Well, that's the fear. We're turning into a system that just is greener or is washed green, but within the same kinds of parameters of power, parameters of economic entitlement and economic empowerment, which is going to be a huge challenge for all of us going forward. If the climate transition opportunity is not used as a way to rethink the global economy, to make it more just, to make it more equitable, and to make it deliver for the everyday people of the world, then we're not gonna survive the next round of challenges we're gonna get because of this. Because if we end up using extractive models again, it's just a matter of pushing down the consequences of this to another 20, 30 years. It's not changing anything. So we have to fundamentally rethink how we do the economy, and this is about who benefits from it, who uses the resources that we have, the scarce resources we have, including the carbon space that we have, and so on and so forth. So this is a very important debate that we need to have.
Charra Tesfaye Terfassa, you are the Open Society's Economic and Climate Prosperity Program Manager. Thank you so much for sharing your insights on France 24.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's all we have time for this week. If you like this show, please subscribe to People and Profit on the podcast platform of your choice. You can also watch all of our previous episodes on the France 24 app or website. In the meantime, thank you for watching. Bye-bye.